Hi, I'm Shanti, the artist behind Shanti Fine Arts. In Indian mythology, Lakshmi is the goddess of prosperity and wealth. And in this time of the year, we celebrate Lakshmi Puja. That gave me the idea of creating a part surreal kind of oil painting portrait with the idea of, inspired by the idea of Goddess Lakshmi. But while I was doing the painting, I realized that there were a lot of components in the painting, and it would have been a very long video if I would have tried to do cover the entire painting in one video. So this is going to be a two-part video. For today's part, we are going to do the underpainting and the first layer with oils for this painting. And in the next week, we are going to finish this painting. I hope you enjoy this oil painting tutorial. I sketched out my initial drawing on a different sheet of tracing paper, and then I used a transfer paper to transfer the sketch onto the surface of the canvas, which I have already toned with a layer of raw umber acrylic paint. This is the only time I've used acrylic paint in this painting. Next, I'm diluting my oil paint to very, very thin layer using a lot of odorless mineral spirit, and there is very little pigment in it. That is most essential for this particular layer, because I want it to dry within an hour or at the most 2 hours before I can actually start painting. So this is the underpainting stage, where I have mixed a little bit of purple with my raw umber, and I'm just creating a tonal value map or value guide for my portrait and the entire painting in general. So I'm just marking out the darkest areas, and then from dark to light I'm just creating a value map. I am not going into very detail at all, but you can. A lot of portraits are done with a very detailed two-tone underpainting, and that is a great way of doing it. But in this case, and in general, I prefer to do a very loose underpainting and then go over in detail in layers of oils. So now I'm starting with my oils. So the first thing that I'm doing today in this particular case, there are many ways to start a portrait, but in this particular portrait, what I'm doing is I'm first choosing the darkest color, which is a mix of raw umber and purple once again, but this time I'm using a lot more straight pigments, and I'm using liquid as my medium. I'm not using anything else at all, not even odorless mineral spirits. Whatever thickening I need to do, only liquid is what I'm using. So I'm mapping out the darkest lines first, and then from the darkest I'm going towards the lighter areas. Now it looks a little bit too purple and blue in the first, but trust me, it is kind of like because of the camera angle for some reason, and also as we proceed later you will see more of the browns and reds and magentas. So like I said, I'm starting from the very dark color, the darkest of color. That is what I'm mapping out first, and then I'm slowly adding a little bit lighter tones each time. There are different kind of paints or different colors that I am mixing in. I'm using raw umber, I'm using purples for the dark shadows, I'm using even a little bit blues here and there for the darkest of shadows, and for the mid-tones I'm adding in more of burnt sienna and sometimes a little bit magenta for a reddish tone, and for the very lighter tones I'm adding in a lot of magenta, a little bit of yellow, and a lot of white. But if you have a paint that is called flesh tint or something of that sort, you can use that also to get the mid-tones or lighter tones of the face, and you can adjust it according to the values that you need with a little bit more of reds and yellows. In any kind of skin, no matter what medium you're using, the skin tones are generally a combination of some kind of red, yellow, white, and blue. The blues are for the darker shadow areas, and the red and yellow you can mix it in varied proportions to create different kind of skin tones. Now you can see that at this stage I'm using a lot of white to kind of blend in with the other areas. Now it kind of looks like straight up white, but it is mostly unbleached titanium white and not the actual titanium white. Like I said, for camera angle, the colors do not always look true. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to create the highlight and the lighter areas to the best of my knowledge, but at some areas I don't think it is as perfect as I would want it in the final painting, but that is all right, because in the first layer what you're trying to do is covering the whole area of the canvas. That is your first goal, and the second thing is create a very good understanding of the values, or rather create a very good value map, which you started at when you started the underpainting. But with the different colors that you're using now, your value map becomes much clearer, which means the lighter and the darker areas are much clearer to you. So you know that this is the area where there will be the most amount of highlights, or this is the lightest area, and you know that this is the darkest area, and you know that these are the transitioning colors in between. That is what you need to know. Other than that, if you make some color errors here and there, it doesn't look perfect, then you could always tone it down, or check the error and perfect it in the next layer. Now once this whole layer is done, I will let it dry completely before I start the next layer, which you will see in the next week when I complete this painting. So what I've done, or what you are going to watch in this video today, was done over a period of couple of days. That's because of my schedule. I could not allow a continuous number of hours in one particular day, so I spread it out over 2 days. But this entire layer, whatever I've done in this video, can be done in one single day, and then I would have to let the painting dry for the next layer. Now you can see that I'm bringing in more of the yellows, and at this point the face looks really blotchy. I understand that it does kind of looks very ugly, but that is what is about painting. The initial layers are often very ugly, and we have to bear with it and get over the layers in stages to get to where you want to be. So onto the neck area, I am doing the same thing that I did with the face. First I laid the dark areas, then the mid-tones, and then finally I'm laying the highlight areas. Once again, you can see that there is a lot of difference between the different areas of the face and the different areas of the neck in colors, and that wouldn't be there, or that wouldn't look nice if I left it there for the finished painting. So at the very end, in the next layer, I'll have to tie it all together to come cohesive and become one unified color scheme. But at this point, this is fine, because I'm just trying to establish the dark and light. So as going from dark to light is what I want to do. Onto the hand area, the same principle, laying down the darkest shadows, which is created by purple and brown. Then the mid-tones are mostly browns mixed with magentas in areas and some yellows, and the lighter areas are mixed with more of unbleached titanium white to the mix of brown, yellow, red, and all that jazz that I just explained for skin tones. And then once the flesh tone is more or less laid in different areas, I'll come back with a little bit straight up unbleached titanium white, and then even a little bit of titanium white to create the mapping for the highlight areas, the areas on the hand where I need to be, which I intend to be the lightest. Just like I said, I'm establishing the lightest areas of the fingers, and I'm following a reference photo very closely. I'm not trying to create this out of my mind, but I do not have one single reference photo. I have 2 or 3 different reference photos, from which from one I have taken the eye area, from the other I have taken the face area. The hands are from a different different photo, and the background obviously is kind of a different design altogether. So it is a combination of different photos, so I cannot say that, okay, go ahead and see this reference photo and you will understand what I mean by the reference photo. But to create a very realistic look, I always use reference photos. I cannot work very well or very realistically without reference photos. It will be more of an illustrative style if I want to do so. but everybody has their own different ways. But if you're new to portrait painting, or if you're new to painting in general, then I often would suggest, and if realism obviously is your goal, if realism is not at all your goal, if you're going for abstract or whatever, then you do not need reference photos so much, I guess. So for beginners, if your goal is to get realistic look, try using a reference photo. Now on to the background. I'm first trying to paint the circle around her head, which is kind of symbolizing a halo around her head. And what I'm doing is I'm using different tones of yellow and a little bit of raw umber as well. So you can say browns and yellows are the base, and in some areas I'm using a little bit of unbleached titanium white, so that it kind of, some areas are a little bit lighter, much lighter than the yellows itself. So it's nothing rigorous or definitive. It's more like a mix of yellows, and since this is oil paint which does not dry fast, it's very easy to blend and make a cohesive look altogether and over a period of time. Onto the piece of clothing on her body, which is more like a shawl or a scarf or whatever you want to call it. And I'm going towards a more orangey color, but at this point I'm creating the shadows with raw umber, and somewhere I've used a little bit of purple as well. The most areas I have used a lot of yellows, yellow ochre, cad yellow and all that. By the way, if you're hearing a lot of noise at the background, that's my son playing with his friends, and I apologize. I have the door closed, but they're pretty loud. Kids, what can you do about them? Never mind. On to the background. So what I decided to do is, apart from the lotuses that I'm going to paint, the entire background I'm going to create a tiled look. So like there will be cubes and rectangles behind the lotuses, and I decided to go around the flower with a little bit of greenish color, but I followed a pattern of going from light to dark colors as I'm going from top to bottom. So the very top I'm using colors like unbleached titanium white, a lot of yellows, different kinds of yellows, ochres, rhombers, and burnt sienna a little bit towards the bottom of the tile, and cad yellow and unbleached titanium white and all that. But as I'm going down, or rather in the middle tiles or the bottom tiles, I'm making it darker. So you will be able to see it when I show you the finished first layer at the very end of the painting, that how I am transitioning from yellow to browns to finally blues and purples in the background. It's not a very difficult or detailed background. It's something just to complete the look or make it look a more finished look, which I will obviously go over once in the next painting layer. On to the first lotus. So what I'm doing is I am creating the edges, the tips of the lotus with crimson and magenta. Whichever color you have available, use that. Maybe mix it a little bit of yellow to it if you want a little bit of more orangey look rather than the very dark crimson look. And then come back with unbleached titanium white and a little bit of titanium white, and drag that pink color or crimson color down towards the middle and the bottom, and that will create that dark to light transitioning and a very nice blend. And this is oil paint, so it blends automatically. It doesn't dry very fast, so you don't have to work really quickly. It automatically creates the transition very nicely. So make sure that the edges are sharp, and then go pull the paint down with a little lighter color, which could be unbleached titanium white or titanium white. You try to use less titanium white at this point because you want to save that for the lightest highlights. So that's what I have done for all the lotuses. Onto the final one, which is more like a subtle bud like lotus, so it's not a big deal. and there's not much to define. So that is all I'm showing today for this first layer. Now I will let it dry completely, and then I'll come back next week with the next layer. I hope you learned quite a bit about the first layer or my portrait painting process, and I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what your thoughts are about this kind of a two-part painting where you get to have more detailed information about the painting. I always pay a lot of attention to the feedback you provide and try to cater my tutorials accordingly. So looking forward to your comments, and do not forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.